Hi guys, today I want to talk to you about the CAGED system of finding chords on the guitar and arpeggios. Also how to use that system to increase your ability to play melodies and solo in different spots on the guitar, different ranges and stuff. It's really one of many systems to learn chords, but it's a great one. Really easy, and I'll show you basically what it is. You probably heard of it before, but the word caged is spelled C-A-G-E-D, and it has to do with the shape of certain open position chords. C chord shape, A chord shape, G chord shape, E chord shape, and the D chord shape. Now pretty much everybody knows those shapes. Let's go again. Here's C, A, G, E, D. Now so we're going to name chords based on those shapes. So this is a C chord with a C shape. What we're going to do is we're going to learn how to play those chords with a different set of fingers, leaving our first finger free to do barring if we want to. In Western music there's a whole step between each note except for B and C and E and F. And you can find your chords that way too. All these chord shapes are movable. But they're more movable if you use these bottom three fingers and keep your first finger available for some barring, kind of taking the place of this nut here. So if this is a C-shaped C chord, it's in the shape of a C chord, and it's also C-shaped. Our root is here on the C. If we want to make a C-shaped D chord, there's a C-shaped D chord, using this finger to cover where the nut would have been. Here's a C-shaped E chord. It's this C shape with the root on E. C-shaped D chord, C-shaped C chord. You do the same thing for the A. Here's an A chord. Okay, I can play it like this. This is an A-shaped A chord. Here is an A-shaped B chord. The root is B. Here's an A-shaped C chord, root C, on the 5th string. Here's an A-shaped D chord. Here's an A-shaped E chord. Here's an A-shaped F chord, A-shaped G chord, and so on, back to an A chord. Okay, here's a G chord. And this one's a little hard to play if you want to play it as a chord, but you don't necessarily need to play it. So here's a G-shaped G chord. Here's a G-shaped A chord. Here's a G-shaped B chord. Here's a G-shaped C chord. Here's a G-shaped D chord. I'm using this finger to bar where the nut would have been. It's just like using a capo. This finger is your capo. Here's a G-shaped E chord. So that's kind of impractical to play, but there's a reason we're learning it. C, A, G, now there's E. Here's an E-shaped E chord. I'm going to use these three fingers instead, leave my first finger free. This is one of the most common bar chords. Here's an E-shaped F chord. There's your root F, F. Here's an E-shaped G chord. Everybody kind of knows that shape. Here's an E-shaped A chord, E-shaped B chord, E-shaped C chord, E-shaped D chord. So, C, A, G, E, now we have D. Here's a D chord, that's a D-shaped D chord. You can put your root here. It's a D string. Here's a D-shaped E chord. There's our E. Here's a D-shaped F chord. Here's a D-shaped G chord. Here's a D-shaped A chord. There's your A. There's a D-shaped B chord. There's a root here and a root here. And so on. So we have our shapes C, A, G, E, and D. And the thing about this CAGED system is everything's kind of stacked. The C chord lives here. C, A, G, D, the last chord in the chord shapes in the word CAGED, lives up on top of the C chord. There's our D chord there. So here's our C-shaped C. Here's our A-shaped C. Here's a G-shaped C. Here's our E-shaped C. And here's our D-shaped C. So everything lives in order. So let's say we're going to play a D chord. Here's our C-shaped D chord. Looks like a C chord. Here's D. Here's our root on the A string, and also a root on the B string. C-shaped D chord. Living on top of it is that D-shaped D chord. C-shaped, D-shaped. Here we go. C-shaped C chord, A-shaped, C-shaped D chord, A-shaped D chord, G-shaped D chord, E-shaped D chord, and our D-shaped D chord. It's getting mixed up. Do it with any chord. And so if you're starting in a position where your chord shape is, let's say, A, there's an A-shaped A chord. Well, where are we in the word CAGED? C, A, G, E, D. So the next one's going to be A-shaped A, G-shaped A, E-shaped A, right? D-shaped A, and then we're going to start with a C-shaped. Here's a C-shaped A chord, and then an A shape again. And the reason this is helpful is not just for finding new chords, but each one of those chord shapes has a scale shape that goes with it for major scale. You can do this with the minor chords, diminished, altered chords too, but for now we'll stick to major. So for example, just as a little example, if you learn a lick in this C-shaped pattern, like, you can do the same thing in the D, C-shaped D chord. Do the same thing with E. Same exact fingering. Same thing F, we're playing an F maybe. Same lick. Here's G. Want to play a lick? We know this little lick that we know in C. Move it up to G. Here's our G, C-shaped G chord. Very cool. So each, and in another lesson, I'm going to keep this lesson short. It's 10 minutes already. In another lesson, I'll show you different scale and lick patterns that go with each chord shape. And that way, it'll help you with your improvising. If you learn a melody in this shape, you'll be able to do it here. Or here. So, practice finding those shapes. C-shaped C, A-shaped C, G-shaped C. You don't necessarily have to play it, but just know where it is. You can arpeggiate it if you want. E-shaped C, D-shaped C. And you can also take one shape like for example the E shape, and just move it up the neck. And with open strings, some of them sound cool. Get some interesting things happening that way. Okay, caged is the word. Work on that. I'll come back and show you some licks that go with each of those forms in the next lesson.